And you are going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining and tuning in. If you're new here, if you are a returning subscriber, welcome to all. My name is Shauna and I am a freelance editor slash booktuber slash aspiring author. So thanks for joining this YouTube video. So today in this video, I wanted to go over the differences between traditional publishing versus self-publishing. So I've gotten this question a lot. I know I got it in a comment on a previous video, but I have gotten this question personally a lot of times. Even if authors know the differences between traditional versus self-publishing, they know the basics of it. Sometimes they're not quite sure what they should choose and are asking me for advice. A lot of authors that I work with as editing clients, or that I've worked with in the past when I was an agent. So these were questions that I got, and I wanted to kind of go over them in a video with you. So we're going to go through the differences between the two, what they both kind of entail for the most part, and then the pros and cons of each. Now, I want to preface this video with I am definitely not an expert when it comes to self-publishing. I have not done it personally. Being a former agent, literary agent, I have gone through the process with clients. So I know that process, pretty much backwards and forwards. But as far as the self-publishing, there's a lot of research I've done personally, and I have worked with self-published authors. So I understand the basics. I have personally not gone through it myself. And take my advice with what you will. But I do always highly recommend to authors, do your own research, figure out what is going to work best for you. Nobody can tell you what to do with your book. Only you can figure out what is going to be the best path for you. So without further ado, we're just gonna jump right on in and get down to the basics of it. Okay, so let's first start off with what each of these two different paths are. So traditional publishing is what most people will kind of know if you are an author or aspiring author, or if you're not in the industry at all. So traditional publishing has to do with the basic steps of it is you write your book by yourself, is usually how it goes. You have some friends read it, you get some feedback, you get it tip-top shape as best you can, you start submitting it to agents. And a literary agent will then represent you in your book once you find an agent, and they will take it out to publishers and start shopping it around to editors, who will then decide if they want to sign it or not. Once it gets to a publishing house, it goes through all of the different editing phases, marketing, promotion, all of that kind of stuff, cover design, things like that. And then they go out and sell your book when it is ready. So that is what most people, very, very slim trimmings of exactly what traditional publishing is. Whereas self-publishing is going to be on the other side of that, where you kind of go it alone pretty much the whole way, for the most part. So with self-publishing, it is up to you to find an editor if that is what you decide to do. I always highly recommend this. Get an editor, even if you are self-publishing. Even if you are an editor yourself, get an editor. I can't stress that enough, please. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you in your book. I always highly recommend it especially until you can get your craft where you want it to. But you go through the whole phases by yourself. You hire an editor, you start working with them, you get your book in tip-top shape to publishing ready, ready to go. You are the one who has to reach out to cover designers and design the cover, unless you can do that yourself. If you can, kudos to you. I wish I had that talent. That is one talent I really wish that I could do, is draw, and I just can't do it. But there are some very talented people out there. So, reaching out, getting a cover designer, doing all of that for your book, and then you are in charge of the marketing and promotion of your book solely. So oftentimes self-publishing can be a little lonely, but that is the basics of what traditional publishing is versus self-publishing. It's a basic rundown. So what we can do now is go through the pros and cons of each. And again, this can be something that another person, something that I say as a con may be a pro to somebody else. So please take what I say with a grain of salt, do your own research, and decide what is going to be best for you and your artwork and your book. And I said artwork because it is like art. Writing a book is art, and it becomes your child. So you have to decide what is going to be best for you and your baby. We will start with traditional publishing first, the pros and cons of traditional publishing. So traditional publishing, there are definitely pros and definitely cons, just like with everything. So the pros for traditional publishing, first off, you're not alone. Like I said with the self-publishing earlier, it can often be lonely unless you find other self-publishing authors, like independent authors. It can often be a lonely road. Whereas with traditional publishing, if you have no idea how this industry works, what's trending, how to go about certain things, if you're seeking advice constantly, traditional publishing is definitely a pro for you. You will have once you find an agent, I should say, it's kind of, you get deep in the trenches when you start querying agents and submitting your stuff out to them. That can often be a lonely part of it. But most of the time, like once you get that agent, you have the biggest cheerleader that you can have in your corner. And that is something I would always say to my clients, and anybody who was a part of our agency that I worked for. Like, we are your biggest cheerleaders, we are your biggest advocates, but we also know the industry, and we're a business partner essentially with you. So we're coworkers, in a sense. So we are going to have to tell you like it is sometimes, even if you don't want to hear it. It sucks, but we have that nice balance, as agents do. So you are often not alone. So that is definitely a pro, especially if you don't want to put in the research, don't want to put in the effort to figure out how to do formatting, or finding a cover designer, or finding an editor, or finding out where you can even distribute your book, or how to distribute your book when it comes down to ISBN numbers and how to acquire those. All of that is taken care of by the agent and the publisher. You have no worries on that front. Another big pro I will say is that you can really focus more so on the book itself and writing and the revising part of it, because obviously you have to do that. Those are the first couple of pros for traditional publishing. The other pro that I am going to say is you get an advance. What does this mean? So when you have signed an agent and they have found a publisher and an editor who wants to acquire your book, the editor who wants your book specifically will come to your agent with a proposal of, this is what we want to offer you as an advance so that we can acquire the rights to this book with this author. So they will work on their end with their publishing house. They have to go through all kinds of hoops on their end. They bring this to the agent, and then the editor and the agent are usually negotiating back and forth. They'll send over the contract with everything. So they are negotiating, the agent is negotiating the advance for you, how much money you're gonna get up front for selling the rights to your book. And they are going to negotiate different clauses within the contract. So advocating for you for certain things, it could be something like the author is going to have more say in the cover design, or they are going to be allowed to have a say if it's turned into an audiobook, who they cast as the narrator. Different things, different instances like that, different rights and royalties that kind of go with the whole contract. So your agent is negotiating that back and forth with the editor, obviously keeping you in the loop as the author of what's going on and what they're offering and such and such. So the pros that I'm going back to with being with traditional publishing, getting an advance, this can be a range of numbers. So obviously for someone like Sarah J. Maas, Rebecca Yarros, like they are going to get pretty much 6 figures, if not higher, of an advance to acquire the rights to their book. As a debut author, you are not more than likely not going to get that. There are special cases, I will say that. I never say never, that they never get it, but it's rare. So oftentimes I have seen offers come in as low as $100 for an advance and as high as like $10,000. So there's a multitude of ranges. Again, it's so dependent upon the author, the agent, the editor, the publishing house. It is so dependent on so many different factors. So it is such a wide range and it is very hard to nail down. But basically what an advance is the publishing house is paying the author to acquire the rights to the book that the author has written. They are saying, we own the rights and we can basically do what we want with it. We are going to give you this amount of money. Let's say it's $10,000 up front. So that way you have the security knowing like this is us getting the rights to your book. Now, oftentimes they will kind of split that up usually, depending on this amount at signing and then this amount when the manuscript is delivered to us and such and such. So again, it's all dependent on the publisher. It's all dependent on the agent and what they negotiate as well. However, so going into that, you get an advance, which is great because authors are like, yes, money in my pocket. $10,000 sounds so nice. But remember, oftentimes these payments are split up. And if you have an agent, which if you are going to publishing houses, a majority of them are going to require an agent submit your work. They are not going to accept work from an author that is just submitting this to them. So oftentimes you need an agent to get into those houses. You have to take into factor as well the contract that you signed with your agent and what percentage they are going to take from that advance, because they will get part of that as well. So keep that in mind whenever you are thinking about traditional publishing. So the last pro that I'm going to talk about with traditional publishing is going to be, so I'm going to go back to some of these points to kind of point out cons reflecting those pros. You get this, but you also have to do this or deal with this. So the last pro that I'm going to say for traditional publishing is that a lot of the work itself, marketing, publicity, all of those types of things are going to be covered by the publisher most of the time. Again, it is so dependent on the publishing house that has acquired your book. It's dependent on how they want to market your book and promote your book. But oftentimes, a lot of that budget does not need to come from you. So they will take care of mostly all of that, a lot of those fees, and you will, again, be good to just sit back and focus on writing your next book or revising the one that is submitted to the publisher once the editor has gone through and done their phases. So that is definitely a pro. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about what's trending with book covers or, what's trending with these marketing tactics or what you should do for publicity and such and such and such. A lot of times that is going to be in the publisher's hands. So that is definitely a pro if you are like, I hate marketing, I can't do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to touch it, then traditional publishing might be your route. That might be a better option for you. All right, so now we are going to go through the cons of traditional publishing. So I will start back with the advance. Let's kind of go back to that. The advance is great, right? You have got $10,000, like I said earlier, in your pocket. The publishing house has said, we are giving you $10,000 to acquire the rights to your book. We own it now. We can pretty much do what we want with it. Again, depending on what is negotiated in the contract with the agent. From there, though, you have to pay that $10,000 back. In a way. Again, it doesn't come from your pocket, so don't think of it like you got to fork out $10,000 at some point and just give it all back at once. What will happen is that $10,000 has to be earned back by the publisher through the sales of your book. So once your book has made the $10,000 in royalties back to the publisher, then you will start acquiring the rest of those royalties, again, whatever is negotiated with your agent, as what you earn throughout the years, if your book is still selling. So the difficult part of this is, though, as a debut author and someone who is not well known, oftentimes it is very hard to earn back that advance. Not impossible. And again, it depends on how big the advance was, but it is a little bit slightly more difficult. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, the money up front in your pocket sounds amazing, but you got to remember also that a lot of these books, as a debut author, may not earn that back, or if they do, it is going to take a long time to get there. I'm talking like a couple years maybe. And it depends also on if they do reprintings, like more printings of your book, I should say, to get out to distributors, to put at local bookstores, Amazon, things like that. So that is definitely a con. I will say another con of the traditional publishing route is what I was talking about before with the marketing and publicity side of it. I say that they take care of it mostly. It is still up to you to have an author website, an author social media pages. Like, it's not required. I say it's highly recommended to have, at minimum, an author website. You definitely should have that ready to go, whether you traditionally publish or self-publish. I don't care what you do. It is such a good idea to have your own website, to have that separate from social media even, and just have everything housed there for you and for people to go to find you. But it is still up to you to a degree to promote your book. You still have to, as much as it sounds amazing and you think that these publishers are going to do 100% of the marketing for you and do this really big campaign push to like put your book out there, oftentimes it's not what you will want it to be. And it can be difficult because, especially as a debut author, I should say, because unless you're somebody like Rebecca Yarros who is raking in the money and, they're willing to put behind her so much marketing and publicity money, they have to see where they can take the risks and where they can't. And so it is still going to be up to you to publish and push your book to find readers. It's not as hard as self-publishing, I will say that, but it's definitely still difficult. So something to keep in mind. So the last con that I am going to say for traditional publishing is that you do have less creative control over your book. Once it's handed over to this editor and to this publishing house, you, as I said before, are selling the rights to your book. And depending on how your agent has negotiated your contract, you may not have a lot of say in cover design, in audiobook narrator, if they decide to do that, if they want to publish that. You will not have as much control on the editing process and the revision process. There are clauses in these contracts with these publishers that state if it's not up when you're going through the editing and revising rounds with them, they have the right, again, depending on the contract. Please, again, it's all going to be dependent on the contract and the publishers and the agents and everything that is negotiated. But sometimes there are these clauses in these publishing agreements that will say, if we can't get this book revised the way that we want it, we have the right to drop you. Then you owe back the advance that you've gotten, all of these things. So it's a whole, doesn't happen often, not that I've seen anyway, but it can happen. So you do have less control over that creative process. There are a lot more hands in the pot when it comes to traditional publishing. And when it comes right down to it, it's going to be in the hands of the people who own the royalty, the rights, the creative rights to that work. So that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so jumping into self-publishing now, we are going to go over the pros and cons of each of those. I will say it's a little reflective. I've kind of talked a little bit about it through this video so far already. But basically, we'll start off with this first one with self-publishing. a mirror to what I just talked about with the last con in traditional publishing. With self-publishing, you can do whatever you want to do. You have the freedom to release, I don't know, 12 books a year if that's what you want to do. You have the freedom to pick whatever cover design you want. You are free to do several different cover designs. I've seen indie authors do that where they offer 2 different covers for people who want one of each, or, you know, prefer people on the cover and one that doesn't have people on the cover. You can do hardback, you could do paperback, you could do collector's editions, you can do whatever the frick you want. And so some people really find that appealing. I mean, I know I do. You have a lot more creative and artistic freedom. You will be able to get the book edited how you want. You work with an editor, if that's what you're deciding to do. Again, highly recommended. And you will work with them on your vision, on what you want and the outcome you want for this book or this series, if you're writing a series. Again, you choose cover designer. If you want to get an audiobook narrator or like turn it into an audiobook, you can do that. You can choose whoever you want. You can publish it however you want. You can put it on whatever platforms you want. You can distribute it however you want. There's literally no limit to self-publishing. Obviously, there are good and bad ways to do a lot of these things and, you know, better ways to go about a lot of this stuff. But for the most part, you have the say of whatever the heck you want to do with your book. So that is definitely a pro, and something that appeals to a lot of indie authors is that they can choose however they want to go down this path. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom. All right, so another pro of the self-publishing side is going to be kind of reflective of the advance that authors get for traditional publishing. So with the, or I won't say the advance. So, I mean, because that's kind of a con. I'm going all over the place. I'm so sorry. So with self-publishing, you keep from day one all of the royalties that you make from your book. You also maintain all of the rights to your book, which gives you that creative freedom to do whatever you want. So you keep all of the royalties that you make on the book itself, obviously after the cost of whatever it takes to make the book itself. You take that home day one. So that is definitely a pro. I will say that sometimes, depending on how much it costs to actually make the book, I wouldn't expect to be making, you know, like $20 or $30 per book. You're not going to be taking home that sort of profit on each book. It's going to be more like a couple dollars, maybe like $4 or $5 at most. Again, I'm not an expert in self-publishing, but from what I've seen with the authors that I've worked with, it's not much. So keep that in mind. However, there are tons of options. You know, there's Kindle Unlimited, which pays you by the amount of pages that are read from the ebook. And you can also, obviously, if people are buying your ebook from Amazon or bookshop.org now has ebooks. So everybody needs to check that out because I'm so freaking excited about that. Anyways, I will post all of that information about bookshop.org down in the caption below, especially with the announcement that they are selling ebooks now. So it is definitely a pro if you are looking at it that way, that you keep all of the royalties from day one or all of the profits from day one, and that you retain the rights to that book, your baby, always. So that's definitely appealing to a lot of people. Okay, so this next bullet point that I'm going to do for self-publishing is a little bit of a pro and con, depending on who you are. So, and then we can kind of switch over to all of the cons itself after that. So with self-publishing, this, like I said, can be a pro or con depending how your brain works. You have to deal with all of the business aspects of self-publishing. So you are the one who is going to have to handle the distribution, the marketing plan that you should put together. You have to, you know, keep track of a lot of financial things on your end, monies you earn for tax purposes, all of these kinds of things, the cost of what it takes to make versus what you're taking home, and make sound decisions based off of the data that you're pulling. And you kind of have to, in a sense, be your own manager at that point. So some people find this really appealing. I myself am a Virgo brain, so I like looking at numbers and how things are performing, and I like looking at statistics of stuff. But I also like, figuring out how to do the formatting of a book, and how that goes into when you go into distributing your book and getting it out there to the public, formatting the pages a certain way with a certain font and all of that kind of stuff. Some people hate the idea of that. So that could be a con. Some people love that idea and like to take a little bit of a break away from the writing and the creative side and start working that other side of their brain where it's a little bit more analytical. And that's me. So if you can choose to look at this as a pro or con, but these are just some of the things that you have to think about when you go into self-publishing, that you will have to handle on a daily basis pretty consistently. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now after going through the pros of self-publishing, and then that last one that was kind of a pro, kind of a con, depending on who you are and how you choose to look at it, I will now be jumping into all of the cons of self-publishing. So I know they're dreaded, just like with traditional publishing though. I mean, there's good and bad things. It's the same way with self-publishing. No matter what route you take, there's always going to be good and bad things. So jumping into the cons for self-publishing, the first one that I have written down is you have no advance up front. So that is definitely something that, a lot of authors, that can be a deal breaker for them, which is totally fine. Everybody's situation is different. As I mentioned with the pros for self-publishing, you keep the royalties and all of the profits essentially off of the book from day one. However, you have no advance up front. There is nothing, major payment that is given to you for all of the work that you have put into writing and getting this book ready to be out there in the hands of the public. So, that can definitely be a disadvantage in a way, because it's like you could have spent months, if not years, writing this book. And that advance sometimes from a traditional publisher can be the little boost that you need to prove, not just prove, but like as a compensation for all of that previous work that you have done already up until this point. So that is definitely something that can put you at a disadvantage from the gate. So something to keep in mind. So the second thing that I want to mention about cons for the self-publishing bracket is that you are going to be responsible for all of the marketing, all of the back end of stuff. Like I mentioned before, you are going to be in charge of the business aspects of it and the business side of the self-publishing. But the other downside to this for self-publishing is that a lot of this you are going to have to pay for yourself somehow up front. So what I mean by that is you are going to have to find a way to pay for editors yourself. They, most of the time, the good ones at least, do not come free and can sometimes not be cheap. So, and I say cheap because you can find editors on platforms such as Fiverr and things like that where people are offering their editing services. Now, platforms like that, it's a little bit difficult, one, to navigate and find somebody pretty trustworthy. And also that is going to be qualified enough to edit your book. But on top of that, it's a lot of these editors striving for these jobs, and they're going to offer a much lower rate because they are competing with other editors for these jobs specifically. So while that may be a good thing for you as far as you're paying a lower price, it is very hard to distinguish then who is qualified and who is not. So that can be tricky to navigate. So finding a good editor is going to be an investment. It is going to be something that you need to really put aside some thought and money towards to make sure that your book is as good as it can get before it gets into the hands of readers. So you may have to pay for a developmental editor. I always highly recommend it until you can get to a place in your craft of writing that is going to, where you feel confident enough that you've gotten your story structure, your plot, your character arcs, your world building, like all of this is fully well developed enough after you've done self-revising. But even then, I still highly recommend a developmental editor just because they're going to point out things to you that you may not see. Now, I know of some indie authors who don't use developmental editors. They use beta readers and critique partners to get them through up into the point that, they need to be. And then they pay for either copy and line edits where someone is going through and making sure that all of the language is making sense and working for your book, as well as a proofreader who is going to obviously check for grammatical errors and such. So either way, it's an investment for these editors because even proofreaders are going to cost a little bit of money because they are essentially having to read very, very slowly. Obviously, they get faster as, the more experience they have, the faster they are at it, but they are still having to triple and double check everything in a whole book. So it is going to take time and it is going to take money. So keep that in mind. Other things that you may have to pay for upfront, obviously ISBN numbers. You do have to purchase those to coincide with your books. That can sometimes cost a pretty penny. A lot of places will have packages, so you can buy like 10 at a time or things like that, which can help keep those costs down for you if you know that you're going to continue self-publishing. So the cost per ISBN number is obviously going to be a lot lower if you buy a pack of them, but it is a big investment up front. So cover designer as well. You're going to have to pay for a cover designer by yourself. I say by yourself, you are solely responsible. Obviously, like if you have help from family members or friends who want to help you in this journey, this is something that they can help in. I'm not saying that you have to pay for everything, but a lot of times it is going to be your responsibility to figure out how it gets paid. So that can be a con because, writing the book itself, obviously, is not going to cost you money. It'll cost you time and energy, but the fact of you have to pay for a lot of these other things leading up to the release of your book before you've even made a penny and there's no advance can often make a dent and be something that deters people away from the self-publishing side. Okay, so the next point that I'm going to talk about is it can be very, very time-consuming and research heavy. Now I say this as this is mostly for people who are going to be debut indie authors. Obviously, once you have specifically gone through the process and understand it better and you are continuing to do it, if you decide that self-publishing is the path you want to take for all of your books, obviously you're going to know things you didn't know with your first book and you learn from each book that you publish from here on out. But it is going to require a lot of time and a lot of energy researching how all of this works. So finding out that you need those ISBN numbers, how to go about buying them, who's the best supplier to give you this, how do you go about inputting all this information into Amazon, what are the best SEO tactics, which is search engine optimization, how are people going to find your book? Because you can write an amazing bestseller level, like thousands and millions of people will love your book, but it's all a moot point if they can't find it or it has a crappy cover. So there's a lot of things that go into it and a lot of research that you have to do yourself to figure out what is going to work best in your scenario for this specific book in particular, as well as the genre that it's in. I mean, you have to understand different genres and what word counts need to be for what genres, because it's expected within the industry, even if you are self-publishing, to be within an estimated word count range for specific genres. You can't, a lot of times, write a romance and not have a happily ever after and classify it as a romance. So there are particular things like that that are going to require time, energy, and a lot of research hours to figure out how to go about putting your book out into the world. The best way to do that, not only just in general to put a book out there, but the best way for you and your book specifically. But just how to get it into the hands of readers. Like, what is going to be the best way to do that and have all of these people love your book and read it and pass it on to their friends. I mean, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. But all of this will lead into my last point, which is the last con for self-publishing. Okay, so the last con that I am going to talk about when it comes to self-publishing is something that I have mentioned a couple of times throughout this video, in that it can be a long and lonely road oftentimes. So be prepared for that. And I say it can be lonely, it doesn't have to be, but oftentimes it may feel that way because you are going it alone. You are having to figure out what you need to do, what's trending, what is going to work for you in your book as far as marketing goes, as far as design of things go, how to go about formatting your pages, how to go about finding distributors, where you should put your book out there, getting it into indie bookstores even, or even Barnes and Nobles around where you live. All of that can be hard to navigate by yourself. So oftentimes indie authors can get a little lonely with that. Some people find that to be what they want to do. You know, they like going it alone, and they like, you know, traveling this road and paving the way and figuring it out and forging ahead. And that's great. But oftentimes there will be a lot of moments as well where it is going to be a little taxing and it's going to feel like you are in this by yourself. I will say, to combat this, definitely find your other indie authors that is going to be your group, like your go-to people that are going to help, even just lend an ear when you need to vent about what is going on in your process. That can be your lifeline at times. So finding those other indie authors who are going through the same thing as you are, but who can also lend some advice here and there. You know, there may be somebody in the group that you talk to that is more well-versed in a specific thing, such as formatting or something like that, while you haven't done as much research on it, or you don't know how, or you don't really care for it. It's not really your thing, but you know you got to do it. You know, and they help you out with that. And then on the flip side, there's something maybe that you know really well, you've researched the heck out of and can figure out, and you know exactly how to do it. Whereas the other author, you know, may not. So then you can swap things and swap advice and figure out how to help each other. So I always highly recommend finding your group. Even if you go the traditional publishing route, just finding your author friends is going to be such a lifeline and such a good support and good community to have all around. And definitely find some people online for sure, but if you can, find some people in your community who are indie authors, because meeting up for coffee every now and then is just a balm to the soul. So it's definitely something to keep in mind to make that self-publishing road a little less lonely. So I will say, I'll throw this in as a bonus. If you haven't already heard of it, there is also a different form or a different path of publishing, and it is called hybrid publishing. I will preface this next section with, I know very little about hybrid publishing. I don't know many people who have actually done it, like personally. I've seen people online do it, and it has gotten pretty big in the past couple of years. It's been around for a while, but it's definitely grown in popularity lately. And it's going to be something, if you are interested in, if you're not quite sure which path is for you, traditional or self-publishing, hybrid publishing might be an option, because they like to market it as the best of both worlds. And it kind of is, in a sense, from what I have gathered, but please do your own research on it, figure out if it is going to be the best path for you. I'm definitely not an expert in it. I know more about the other two than I do hybrid publishing. But from what I have gathered, it is, like they say, kind of the best of both worlds. You still retain all of the rights to your work. You don't have to sign that over to a publisher. However, you are still working with an imprint, or not an imprint, I'm sorry, with a publishing house to they will have a whole team of people who are cover designers, formatters, people who know where and how to distribute your book and will do that for you. As well as they will have a host of editors to help you through that whole process. So everything is in-house, everything is right there for you to use. As far as, obviously you won't get an advance like you would with traditional publishing, but you still retain the rights to your work legally wise. But as far as if they are taking a percentage of the royalties that you make per book, if they're taking a percentage of that, if they are, I am not 100% sure how that works on their end and how all of that kind of shakes out, or what that whole process looks like. I just know that this is an option and something that is kind of buzzing. So definitely look into it, see if it's something that you might be interested in. I will try to put some helpful links down in the description below to help you guys out with starting to understand the basics of that and seeing if that might be the best path for you. All right, well, that is pretty much it for this video. I know it's probably gonna be a longer video and I only barely scratched the surface of the process for both of these different publishing pathways, as well as the bonus pathway that I threw in there with hybrid, and the very, very minimal pros and cons of each of them. So please, like I said at the beginning of this video, do your own research, see what's going to be best for you. Don't be afraid to reach out to other indie authors, authors who are traditionally published or even agents. Go to workshops and different conferences, talk to agents themselves or editors who work at publishing houses or freelance editors as well who may know a lot about this industry, and hopefully, you know, they kind of do, but who know a little bit about both traditional and self-publishing and can maybe lend a helping hand. It's definitely, you have to decide what is going to be best for you, and what is going to be best for your book. And like I said, I barely scratched the surface in this video of all of the different pros and cons of each, as well as the different avenues you can take within each of those. So if this is something you're more interested in, please let me know down in the comments below. If you have any specific questions, you know, let me know down in the comments if you have any of those specific questions that I can answer, or maybe I can make another video for you guys. Let me know that too. I would love to help out as much as I can. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really, really does help out my channel. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Stick around. I'm going to be posting more of this type of content. Yeah, and go say hi to me on social media if you aren't already following. But other than that, guys, I will see you in my next video. Bye. You haven't been in the videos lately. You're a sleepy cat, aren't you? Yeah, she's just a sleepy cat.